Hello everybody and welcome to our press conference for the opening of the Decolonial House in Berlin Mitte, Friedrichstraße. I welcome you very warm-hearted on this beautiful sunny day, and we are more than happy that we get the chance to open the Decolonial House on the Day of Europe. Welcome everybody. We want to use this opportunity to discuss with several guests we got from different countries who talk about the experience of colonialism and oppression. And therefore, I want to introduce Eva Yakubovska from Ukraine. Our second guest is Cristina Scripcari from Moldova. To my right, we have Nedal Al Amari. He's an independent journalist and activist, and he represents the people of Syria. Last not least, we have Giorgi Kakabadze from wonderful Georgia here today. So let me start with a brief introduction. So the house we see behind us was for decades called the Russian House in Berlin. For most people in Europe, it also covers a tragic history and a lot of pain that we will point out, and every guest will talk about their experiences with imperialistic Russia. So on this opportunity of opening the Decolonial House today, we want to start with giving people their perspectives on their experiences and regarding oppression and what actually led them to go on with their fight and finally work for the opening of our Decolonial House. So can I ask you, Cristina, first, and can you maybe briefly explain to everybody what your history is, what the history of Moldavia is that turned you, after all, into an activist?
I come from Moldova, the Republic of Moldova, and that's a very small country with just 2.5 million people living in it. And you cannot imagine how often did I hear the question, "Oh, you're from Moldova, so you're just Russian, right?" And that's a question that hurts me each and every time. And that's why I'm here today to tell you a bit about the history of my country, of how it was shaped and influenced by Russian imperialism. And we're just tired of that, and we just want to be called Moldovans and our country not to be called a part of Russia. Yeah.
I think that is a great answer, first of all. And second of all, I heard you prepared something for us today. So also to educate everybody about the history of Moldova and the whole background of it. Because let's be honest, in Germany there's also a lot of disinformation going on, and very few people, not consciously, but don't have really the background information they deserve to have. So can we start with you? We heard you prepared something for us.
Yeah, I prepared a little history lesson and I hope it's going to be interesting. So I would like to start with the fact that my country has been shaped and influenced by Russian imperialism since the late 18th century up to 1991. So it's nearly 500 years, can you imagine? And it was just with a few interruptions. And the last time it happened, it was the Soviet Union. It happened in 1940. Russia, Soviet government of Russia at the time, annexed Bessarabia, which was a part of Romanian kingdom from 1918 to 1940. And since that day, we became a part of Soviet Union. Yeah. I mean, there were also good things that happened because we also got free from a Nazi regime, but sadly, because Romania was fighting with Germany on the side of the Nazi Germany, but sadly the outcome of that was not so nice, because after the war in 1946 and 1947 there was a big famine in Soviet Union, and the countries that suffered the most were actually Ukraine and Moldova, and that's one of the least well-known parts of Moldovan history. But during this time, during these 2 years of famine, there were 123 people who lost their lives. And it's something that you don't learn as much in history lessons in countries that are still influenced by Russian politics. Then there was a very tragic thing that happened in 1949. A lot of Moldavian families, so ethnical Moldavians and Romanians, became victims of ethnic cleansing and deportations of the Stalin regime. And it happened to be that the parents of my grandmother, so my great-grandparents, they were victims of these mass deportations that happened.
Oh. So also you have a very personal historical connection to what it means to live under, to live in the russkiy, as it's called, or a system of permanent oppression and colonialization. And it is very interesting, because I believe that most people, including myself, to be honest, didn't know about this so much. So it's. Do you want to hold your speech that you prepared, or?
I mean, yeah, but we can have it as a discussion as well. I think it's more fun.
I just wanted to also give you the chance, because I really appreciate it, because there are many people, including myself to a certain bit, who are not aware of what it means to live in Soviet Union, what it means to live now and with the Russian threat. Mm-hmm. And since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, I think there was a change in Europe and in the whole world to realize finally what it means. And this should have happened, of course, much earlier. This should have happened when with Moldavia. This should have happened with Georgia in 2008, and we're going to talk about that as well in a minute. But what I would love you is to give us this full information.
Okay, I think I can tell you a bit about what happened to my family, and then tell you how it still influences Moldova today. So as I started telling you about these mass deportations that happened, they did happen to my great-grandparents. So they were deported on one night in July 1949. They were just put in wagons that were made for transporting animals with 11,000 other families. And they were taken to a part of Russia that is called Zabaikalia, which is very far from Europe. It's, I think it's around 7,500 kilometers away from home. They were transported there in horrible conditions. They were just getting like a few, I think 100 or 200 milliliters of water per day, almost nothing to eat. Sometimes they were stopping during their journey, and the dead bodies would just be thrown out of their wagons. Some people could bury their families, some bodies would just be left there. During the travel, yes. Then when they arrived, they lived in so-called barracks, which meant that they were living on, they were just sleeping on the ground. They were living in a small room, 4 of them. So my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather, his sister, and his mother. Yeah, and I forgot to mention that when they got deported, all of their estate, everything they had was taken away from them, except of a few pillows and a blanket that they were allowed to take with them. So yeah, you can imagine how hard it should have been for them to lose absolutely everything they had, be transported far away from home, and then live in horrible conditions. After that, there is something very tragic that happened, because 2 first babies of my great-grandparents, they died because of living in a settlement. But thankfully, my grandmother was not one of these babies, and she survived it. Yeah,
We are very happy she
Yeah.
survived, actually.
I am.
For sure you are. I want to ask you also, what is your feelings? Why do you think that this lack of information is still around? When I hear your story, I must admit, though I am trying to get informed historically as much as I can, still I haven't heard of this. Do you think institutions like the Russian House, who finally got closed now, are responsible also for the rewriting of history, and in which way does Russia up to this very day use propaganda tools that affect your country? What is your thoughts about it?
I want to say that it all started back in the Soviet Union because the Soviets were trying to erase Moldovan and Romanian history since they occupied this region, and before that it was a part of Romania. They were trying to kind of cut all ties with Romanians, you know, because Romanian and Moldovans are historically belong to the same kind of ethnic group. We even speak the same language. And the Romanian traditions, the Romanian literature, the Romanian language, it was really erased during the Soviet era. For example, the Romanian language is a Latin language and you write it in the Latin alphabet, but during the Soviet times, they were forcing people to write it in Russian Cyrillic letters.
Okay.
Yeah, and the Russian language was forced on people, so there were much more Russian schools than Romanian schools. So many people ended up not being able to go to school and learn in their native language. And it was needed for you to get a degree and to be successful in a job. And obviously it stayed because it lasted for so many years. Like, for example, my father, so he comes from a fully Romanian-speaking family, and his mom is a teacher himself, but when he was 7 years old and he had to go to the first grade, they just told him, sorry, we have no places in a Romanian school, because there were just not enough for the amount of people. There were just much more Russian schools, and that's how he ended up learning Russian. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is a part of history that a lot of people can share. I want to apologize because I forgot that we were supposed to have another guest here from Chechnya, but this guest can't be here, and this is due to security reasons that are life risking for the person we were invited here. So I want to apologize for not introducing you, and I want you to know that Chechnya is also highly oppressed by Russians to this point that it even means a life threat if we would have our guest here. So, talking about influence in educational ways and also like erasing culture and language, I would love to have Eva tell her story of it, because this recalls for me a lot what I know about Ukraine.
Thank you for the question. Thank you for coming. Thank you for listening to the stories. Basically, the first time as Ukrainian language was erased by Russia was 17th century. You can imagine how long it lasts and how much it take actually to save Ukrainian language or Ukrainian culture. Ukrainian language and Russian language are different, although still some officials are not recognizing this, and that's actually supporting this Russian imperialism, which is lasted for a very long time and still is and was until this Russian house was open in Berlin. Finally, we have the Decolonial House. If to speak about the perception how they were canceling and erasing Ukrainian language, the first law which I name, it was order from Tsar in Moscow Imperia, 17th century, and basically they started to ordering to fire down all books written in Ukrainian language. Through the centuries, it was a lot of orders, small and big. The most, I think, known would be I mean, in Ukraine, definitely not known abroad, unfortunately, or not very well known. It's Emsky Ukaz and Valuevsky Circular. The order which I'm speaking about, it's 19th century, and I will quote Order Valuevsky Circular, basically how they order to erase Ukrainian language by saying Ukrainian language was never was, is not, and will not be. So Valuev, Ukrainian language is, will be, and was, of course. The answer to that should be. And if we'll think, unfortunately, that tradition of erasing the Ukrainian language was carried also by Soviets. Unfortunately, the language which my ancestor partly also speak, which was saved in dictionary by Hrinchenko in 1930s, was completely erased by Soviets, destroyed, and it started kind of like, as you also named this, like this push to like Sovietization in the order, like basically what is Sovietization? It's Russification, and that's why this language was not saved. Right now we have just like some small pieces of that. We would be never able to reconstruct this because Russia was destroying not just by ordering to not to speak language, to fire down all books in Ukrainian language, but also by killing the writers, people who spoke this, schools, teachers, and also after killing people who carried this language, they started to kill archive. Not many knows, but in Kyiv, and we're speaking right now about 1960, basically not very far away from here, by some strange condition in Kyiv, the archive of Ukrainistika, so basically of Ukrainian archive, of Ukrainian, so to say, like ethnography, this like research, collecting of writing text, everything possible, like pictures of people. It was fired down, but particularly just this department of the whole library. And from the testimonies of Ukrainian writers back then, 60s, the group called 60s, Шістдесятники, they were coming to this library and screaming, asking people like fire saver to stop the fire, but they were just ignoring for whole day and whole night. So you can imagine nothing was left. So basically what we have through centuries forbidden language, killed people who spoke this language, and killed knowledge about those people. That's why many of them we will never know, and let's hope that after the victory we can restore at least something.
Thank you very much, Eva. This, funny enough, recalls very much like what is going on in Ukraine now, as Russia is bombing deliberately museums, schools, places of education like universities, and deliberately burning books, destroying everything that represents cultural heritage of Ukraine. Talking about, and I need your microphone. Talking about destruction, burning down, and ruining literally a country to colonize it. I'm very happy to have Nedal Al Amari, who prepared for us a brief speech to introduce us how Russia was operating on Syria to this very day.
Thank you so much. Let me describe my feelings first, because I'm really so happy to be here. I'm really so happy to have the chance to talk about my country. I know many of you don't know anything about Syria. We are sad for that. But right now, I'm really happy to talk about my country. I have a small speech. I would like to say it. Since the beginning of the peaceful revolution in Syria in 2011, Syrian people demanding political change and democratic transition. Russia has opposed any international condemnation of the Syrian regime by using its veto power in the Security Council. However, Russia's support for Syrian regime wasn't limited to the political vetoes to put an end to the killing. In late 2014, the Syrian regime was on the brink of collapse before Russia intervened militarily in 2015 to support Assad regime under the pretext of fighting terrorism. However, Russia's weaponry targets civilians to assist Assad to kill his people. Children, women, men. The Syrian Network for Human Rights documented around 7,000 Syrians have been killed by Russian forces in Syria. Russian support for Assad regime, among other reasons, has played an important role in the Syrian regime, which makes the Syrian regime more powerful in Syria in recent years, and possibly the Syrians' dream of freedom and salvation indefinitely. Russian intervention of killing in Syria did not receive the same attention as its intervention in Ukraine. And most people don't see Russia as an aggressor and one of the main culprits in Syria, one of the responsible of the killing of Syrians in Syria. This is because Russia has promoted a narrative of fighting terrorism as its goal in Syria, which is not true, and has stood by the Syrian state, unlike its intervention in Ukraine. This propaganda and misinformation is supported by Russian propaganda machine that it's very harmful to the Syrian narrative that was stolen from us and the Syrian people and victims. And I would like to note about something, that many types of Russian weapons that target Ukrainians were tested on Syrian civilians in Syria for many years since Russian military intervened to support Assad. This is one of the main reasons why Syrians stand with Ukrainian people and with everyone fighting against Russia.
Thank you very, very much. So thank you very much, and I think it's actually super important that you give us an insight on this history, because to me it seems like Russia has a history that is repeating on different countries with disinformation, with pretending it's a civil war within a country, while Russia actively fuels a fire in the country against their own people. This is, as far as I know, and Eva will certainly agree, this is what happened on Crimea and Donbass, and it's a strategy that seems to work so far, and it's also a strategy, and I would love to hear a few words from Giorgi Kakabadze about what is going on in Georgia right now, because my feeling is that Georgia is a victim of Russian propaganda, as it lost already in 2008 20% of its country to a Russian government. Can you tell us a bit more about the strategy of Russian propaganda?
Yes, thank you for inviting me here, and thank you for all organizers, because it is important event, in important topic to speak about. And I want to begin with a brief history, because like Moldovians or Ukrainians or Syrians, the Europeans don't know much about us, because the history of our countries are not so important in European discourse, and about us is a lot of propaganda widespreading from Russian side. And I can only relate to our Moldovan friend here. That's when I came here first time, I studied in Vienna, and the first questions when I told that I'm Georgian, the first questions were, are you Russian? And I told them no, and you speak Russian, and I told no, and at least you write Cyrillic, and no, we have our own language, our writing, and our own history and our own culture, and we did not relate to Russia in any other direction. And I want to say that Georgia has a really big history, like 3,000 years history, and we nailed every of empire which existed, and we will also nail the Russian Empire, but it's matter of time. And the empires you know only from history, like Byzantine, Babylon, Mongols, Ottoman Turks, and kind of stuff, and we survived. And we will survive also Russian propaganda and Russian imperialism. And this house here, what stands behind me, it is for me the house of Russian colonialism and Russian imperialism, because we, thank you, because for me it is the symbol of terrifying Russian empire, which is now led by a bloody dictator, and it is symbol that we oppressed and suppressed people have to unite to fight this propaganda. And about Russian propaganda, what Frank asked me, I want to say that the fighting with Russians for us begins also in 18th century. In Russia and this house here means for me broken promises, although Russia promised Georgia in 18th century to protect from external enemies, because European at the time did not listen to us and did not support us, and for us only one reason, only one thing to do was to make some kind of agreement, and Russia promised to support us and to defend us, but instead of it we got our kingdom abolished and our autokephali of church, Orthodox Church, abolished. And I want to say that it was in the name of Christianity, civilization, and brotherhood. And this is worth to mention that no other empires throughout Georgian history did this to us. They never abolished Georgian kingdom. They never abolished Georgian Christianity and Georgian church. And Russians did it, and they begin to civilize us and to teach us, so to say, Christianity. And I have to mention that Georgia is one of the first countries who converted to Christianity in the first half of 4th century. And Russia, 600 years later, converted to Christianity.
Thank you very much for this interesting.
A little bit. I will also a brief introduction for now. That's since 18th century, Russia is tried to Russify Georgia, to abolish our language, to replace with Russian, but they could not, and they tried also to whitewash our Middle Age frescoes from early Middle Ages, and that is what they are doing. And today they are spreading the propaganda like about Ukrainians and Moldovians that Georgia established by Russia, and that's ridiculous. Only have to say this propaganda spreading now, and this is the house which is spreading this propaganda, and we have to fight this house and this kind of attitude towards.
Talking about disinformation and hybrid warfare, we wonder why it took so long to hold the Russian house here open until it finally was turned into the Decolonial House on this very day. And I want to know why German politics or European politics didn't react earlier to this, because this is not a totally new thing, but it's now with a full-scale invasion on Ukraine, it became a renowned fact that Russia kidnaps children and Russifies them, telling them, your parents don't love you anymore, Ukraine is not existing anymore, and all these horrible war crimes. What do you think, Eva, is the reason why it took Germany so long? Since we're here in Germany, I would really like to know for my country, what is the reason why it took Germany so long to realize what russkiy is about?
I will answer quite shortly because I think, of course, it was to oversee this in 2014 and to listen whole propaganda, but basically Russia started to spread this. If I may recall, I cannot be called an expert on that, but in Ichkeriia, as they started to demonize and spreading such narratives until social media was quite popular or even used or even existed. And basically they are really masters in that and continuing to be. And I think the best case to explain this, it would be White Helmets case. I know that although that's the organization who were helping a lot people, but was demonized. I listened once, the journalist who was explaining how actually that was spreading. So I will pass to Nedal the microphone. You can maybe tell more on this.
Before I talk about that, I would like to add something. I forgot to tell you about it. I come from the oldest capital in the world, which is called Damascus. It's the oldest city. It's history. It's a very beautiful city, very beautiful people. It's so sad to see that city have been destroyed by Russia. It's so sad to see your history have been destroyed by Russia. This is what Russia is doing now in Syria, also working for the next 10 years to try to change the demographic change in Syria. Even they try to add some Russian books for the Syrian children in school. So they try to teach them to speak Russian. But I would like to say that I'm Syrian, and I will remain Syrian. And it's Syria, it's not Russia. This is my country. I will call for freedom for Syria here in Berlin, everywhere in the world, and everybody must hear me. I'm so sorry for the Syrian people who still live in north of Syria. They live every day under Russian bomb. Last night, there is a child, 12 years old, have been killed by Russian warplanes. Did anyone talk about him? No. Did anyone share about him? No. Why? Just because Russian propaganda say that they are fighting terrorists? It's a child, 12 years old. It's a terrorist. This is a game made by Russia just to show that they are fighting terrorists in Syria, which is not true. In Syria, there is dedicated people. People love life. They would like to live in safe life. This is what they want. In Syria, there is no terrorist. Russia is a terrorist state. This is what I would like to say. Sorry, sometimes when I talk about Syria, I get a little nervous because it's really too hard for me. I didn't see my family from 12 years. 12 years I live alone. I left Syria, I was 17 years old. I cannot meet my family. Why? Because they are in Syria under Russia control, and I cannot go to my country. I need the permission from Russia to go to my country, to go to my home. We will break that door, and we will kick them out from Syria. This is Syria. I'm a little nervous. I will try to do later. Sorry.
About white helmets, how
Okay.
we're demonizing them. On propaganda, it was like first.
After you.
Okay, I would like to add something that is my own personal experience, because I just returned from Ukraine last night. I was there for 10 days and met a lot of people and enjoyed the beautiful cities of Kiev and Lviv. And when we hear about Russian propaganda of liberation, I want you to know that you only have to talk to Ukrainian people, to go to Ukraine, to visit places like Irpin, Vitsche, Mariupol, and all the frontline places actually where people are dying. And to see how liberation in the russkiy looks like, to witness what it means to save the poor Russian world in Ukraine. It is nothing but a genocide on Ukraine, and I want this very, very clearly spoken out. And even though I was in cities like Kiev and Lviv, who are rather peaceful at the moment, we woke up yesterday morning in the beautiful city of Lviv to air raids. And this is a threat. This is a psychological threat. Thank God there were no bombs falling on us, on the city. It's a permanent threat that Ukraine wakes up to every morning. And don't forget, it does something with you. Even if you get used to it and you're not automatically running to shelter or hiding in the subway, it does something with you. It's like a permanent pain, a permanent reminder. And I don't know any Ukrainian who hasn't lost a member of his family. I don't know any Ukrainian family who has been splitted from the effects of Russian war on them. There's so many families here in Berlin and all over Europe and the free world spread, missing the husbands and fathers. There's 20,000 children kidnapped that we know of, probably more, and there will be Russified to erase their Ukrainian identity. And this is a method that's at the moment used in Georgia as well, where people demonstrate every day against the Russian-influenced government who wants to push the Russian law. And I want to ask you, what is the reason you think that Ukrainians and Georgians are standing so close together in this? What is the reason why our friend from Syria is talking about his experience and why our friend from Moldova is talking about the history? And since I was in Lviv, I would ask Eva a bit more about her experience within the last more than 2 years of full-scale invasion when it comes to her home city and her home country. So we go back to Georgia for this.
Sorry, Eva, and thank you, Frank, and thank you, Nedal. I feel obliged to say this, that's what now Nedal say. It's not the first time Russia does it, and it will be right if I say on behalf of our Chechenian friends, because they are not there. And that's why Russia began war against Chechenian people, that they told everywhere that they are terrorists, and it is not right. And Russia is a terrorist state, and they are using this kind of propaganda to oppress people like Chechenians, Georgians, Syrians, Ukrainians, Moldavians. And I wanted to say, because it is a time to join our voices and to fight against Russian propaganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's very important that you say that.
I totally support, because like, we are all here. We could share another connection. We definitely have another connection, but unfortunately we need to share the connection that our countries is being bombed, occupied by Russia, terrorist regime, which is still not recognized, which used to have this huge Russian house. And to answer your question, I still want to go back to 2013. I was, and many of you probably as well, participated in the beautiful revolution of dignity, the time when everyone was together. You can see people who are like carrying some stuff to protect the place where we are staying, different people, students, people with already jobs, and even if you will pass the Alea of Hero of Nebesna Sotnya, you will see their pictures, and you will see that there was totally different people, people from different regions, people from different occupation. They are beautifully united to be free, to be in freedom, and to value freedom with the sacrifice. And I think everything started with that, and it was always starting with that for all other countries. As soon as Russia see free people, they're trying to erase them and to kill them. Very similar as they were erasing and killing the language, because the language basically that is the freedom. That's the way to spread the freedom. That's the way to identify yourself, to be free. The language they were targeting, not just because it's just the language, it's some different. No, because it's the concept, that's the part of freedom. And right now they are erasing and killing everybody, each country which has some sense of freedom. And very dangerous if Europe, I mean by this European Union, will not see that threat, because Russia is already here, there.
Can I also say something?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was about to ask you anything, so something.
Yeah, I would like to add to the topic of Russian propaganda that Russia nowadays is still trying to destabilize the situation in my country, because Moldova, together with Ukraine, has applied as a candidate to the European Union. But since 1991, we have a part of our country that is still nowadays occupied by Russia. It's called Transnistria. It's a tiny part of Moldova that is just on the border with Ukraine. And we still have their military presence there. We still have so-called peace troops there that are supposed to stop the war in this region and protect the Russian separatists that live in Transnistria, but I actually don't even think that people who live in Transnistria want it nowadays. And there was an interview with our president, Maya Sandu, that I've watched just yesterday, actually, and she was talking a lot with a Russian journalist, with a Russian independent journalist, about how strong disinformation and propaganda is, how much money is getting invested in it, and that it's still ongoing. It didn't go anywhere. Like, for example, there are elections in Moldova in September, and we're also going to have a referendum about becoming a part of the EU. And Russian propaganda is becoming stronger and stronger in my country. They are paying people to go to protest against our government. They are buying people's votes. They are bringing money into country for that. Like, for example, I think a week ago, people were detained in the airport coming from Russia, just bringing cash for these purposes. And if, like, according to Moldovan intelligence, in the past few years, Russia invested 55 million euros in propaganda and in destabilizing the country that is a young democracy. So can you imagine this number? Like, that's a very huge amount of money that is being just put in disinformation and put into spreading violent narrative about Ukraine, about the West, about Moldova, and I really think it has to stop. And that's why I think this Russian house here has to be closed, because there is no place for Russian propaganda in the center of Berlin. And I also would like to say something, like, as a Moldavian, I know that a lot of Moldavians, and especially, for example, my grandparents, they are very scared of war since the Russian full-scale aggression in Ukraine. And I would like to remind to everyone that the reason why we are safe is because Ukrainians are fighting very hard for us to be safe. And I'm really, really thankful that the war didn't come to my country, and I really do believe that that's because of how brave Ukrainian people are. Thank you.
moment. Yes, actually, when you said the amount of money that was put into propaganda and asked me if I'm surprised, to be honest, I'm not. I mean, I'm a German, and we can see the strong economical bonds that German politicians and Russia had. Let's just think about Nord Stream 2 that was built after the occupation of Crimea, where a few sanctions were done, but then after a while, when nobody was talking about it anymore, Germany shamefully was saying, like, okay, we bond a bit stronger with Russia. That will stop the dictator from invading, and it will stop his bloodthirst. Everybody with a bit of knowledge of German shameful history knows that the contrary is the case. And talking about investments of propaganda and bonds, we also have this in Germany now, which comes as no surprise when we talk about political parties like AfD, Die Linke, and Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, who have very strong bonds to Russia and therefore are a strong voice influencing people to go to peace negotiations, to understand Russia, to talk to Russians, and also they have a way of presenting, and this is the wording of labeling Russia's war on Ukraine as a Ukraine conflict, like it's a conflict within the country. Sarah Wagenknecht was talking, oh, it's one oligarch state against the other. When talking about mass rapture, she was saying, well, it's a war crime. This happens on all sides, which is not true, which is definitely provingly not true. These people are not connected with Ukrainians. They've never been to Ukraine. They don't give a shit about Ukraine. What they give a shit about is their own political power, is their own money, and therefore they are part of the genocide on Ukraine, as they ignore what's going on in Syria, what's going on in Moldova, what's been going on in Chechnya, and what is going on in Georgia. You will not hear a word of support from these people. And I want to say this very, very strongly. We are going to have European elections very soon. I want to ask everybody of you to really use your voice, use your knowledge to inform people who maybe don't have the time or who fall for easy solutions that seem to promise peace. Peace is a beautiful word. We all want peace. The Georgians want peace, who are like now brutalized by police in their own country when they use the right to demonstrate. Nobody wants peace more than the Ukrainians, who lose their best people every day during Russian terrorism. Be careful who you vote for, because this is going to define your future. And I would like to ask all of my guests for a final statement that you can take home with, and that shapes your views and hopefully opens your eyes about this house that has to be closed, and it has to be the Decolonial House.
I would like to say that there is no peace if Russia is still in Syria. There is no peace if Russia is still in Ukraine. We love peace. We would like to have a safe life, but Russian terrorists don't want that, okay? As we love life, to live a peace life, they love to see the blood of the people. They enjoy of killing civilians. But we believe, maybe not today and not tomorrow, but one day, the victory is coming, and we will win. We will fight for our freedom. We will fight for our land. I would like to say it in Ukrainian, Slava Ukraina, as I would like to say, freedom for Syria.
I would like to say that today what Ukrainians are doing, and they are really brave nation and really brave country, because their voices now are heard, and they invited us to share our voices and to bring our problem together and to speak about decolonialism and to speak about Russian colonialism. And I would like to say that's a little bit explain how Russian propaganda works. It's like propaganda operates by repetition and limited access to alternative sources of information. For example, in Germany, it's really shame, but when you check Wikipedia and you check Russian-Georgian War of 2008, you see that there is written Caucasian War, and it's really shame. That's how the Russian propaganda works, and this is the house which is spreading kind of stuff. And another issue is the disparity in resources between countries like Georgia, Ukraine, Chechnya, Moldova, and Syria, and those pushing their own agendas like oligarchs with deep pockets funding initiatives like this Russian house behind me. This financial advantage allows them to amplify their narratives and drown our opposing voices. That's precisely why spaces like the Decolonial House are crucial, and I really want to join our Ukrainian friends and to say that we want here the Decolonial House where our voices will be heard, our oppressed people's voices will be heard, and also the European audience will share our mindset and our perspective, and they see the history from below, not from Russian side. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think what I would like to say is, as I said already, I think there is no place for such a big platform for Russian propaganda in Berlin, and it's almost insulting, I think, to have it right here in the center of this city that is actually a city of freedom, I would say, because people in Berlin are free, and I think that it would be right to just close this place down just because it's dangerous and because it's not appropriate. And I mean, it's a huge building and it can be used for so many other interesting things. Like, for example, I was thinking what people could do there, and I was like looking at the program that Russian House has, and they have the classes of Russian language, but like, why not use this place to have the classes of other languages that were tried to get erased by Russian regimes, for example, like Ukrainian, Romanian, or like Lithuanian or Latvian or Estonian. There are not a lot of language schools in Berlin that offer this kind of classes. As well, this place can be used for exhibition, cultural projects that do inform people of history of our countries. They inform them also about our freedom of decolonization and of independence. I think there's so many things that we could do with this space that is much better than a violent military propaganda.
I have a question actually about that, because the calls to close down the Russian house have been since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine, and they've been very loud and very public. Newspapers talked about it, reported about it. Why do you think it takes so long to close that? What is the reason? Because what the Russian house is doing is obvious, it's quite provable, and it's very well known. So what do you think is the reason why it's open so long, and what is your idea of helping to speed it up so that this turns into the Decolonial House?
I honestly don't have an exact answer, but I think that maybe it's because people don't take it seriously. They don't see a real threat in it. And also, I think Russian house also spreads false information saying that it's still a house that just keeps Russian culture alive and Russian language, and people don't understand that behind that people who work there, who spread this propaganda and disinformation, who people who work directly for Russian regime are actually dangerous. I think maybe people just don't take it seriously. And I would also like to add that maybe it's not as well known, because when I was talking about that to my German friends and telling them about this press conference, a lot of them didn't even know that Russian House was sanctioned and was supposed to be closed. So I think a good idea would be to actually spread more and more information about that, so that more people know about that and that we could put more pressure on the authorities.
What role does What role do you think media plays in that? As we know, for example, the owner of Berliner Zeitung, who is an ex-Stasi person, who was invited to Russian embassy and was caught there and photographed there, who is more or less, who tries to publicly say like he's representing different opinions, but as let's call it coincidence, to say the nicest, he gives a big space to people like Sarah Wagenknecht, and he has personal connections to Russia. What do you think, what influence does German media play here, and how corrupt is some of the German media when it comes to calling out war crimes and Russian propaganda?
I wouldn't like to say any false information, so maybe I would ask Eva if she wants to add something, because
she surely
can say something about that.
About the role of media in Germany.
Yes, so media in Germany, some of them, I do believe, do this just because without the knowledge or not thinking about this. As, for example, quite often we can see, as they are spreading Russian propaganda narratives and Iranian Islamic Republic by writing about the events which is happening in Ukraine or in Iran, basically the channel The One. And I hope that that's some arrogance, but it could be also Russian money. And that's the dangerous. Definitely what should happen more investigation on media. There is not so many actually investigation happening in Germany. There's just couple which is coming time to time, which we see about the spies who are working either for China or for Russia in Germany, but that's not enough. And we can just imagine how actually much Russia invests in that and invests for a long time, because basically why she is successful with the wars, because she has also a hybrid war which is supporting like the war itself. And definitely if there would be no investigation and no question asked about, for example, this bookstore on the right side, that was the first business which actually opened in the Russian house after the full-scale invasion, because before many businesses left the building. But right now they return. And you know what is selling? They are in this bookstore, war game for kids. Literally, war game for kids. Just the one part of this. And that is happening not in Russia, in Berlin. So where is the investigation about that? Where is the journalists who writing about that? Where is the journalists who analyzing actually? Because many are so privileged and comfortable to speak how actually they are analyzing, but actually not doing analyze. I would like to see in German media how actually Russia was also making hybrid war here in Syria after Syrian refugee came. Where is this analyze? Where is analyze about the Ichkeriia, how Russia demonized them? The hybrid war which was started long before as many of us had the smartphones. Where is the analyze what is happening right now in Georgia? Why not many media actually writing about that? People who are dying to be like, I'm sorry, I recall Revolution of Dignity, because when I see the picture in Georgia as people holding European Union flag and standing against the water, I'm recalling Revolution of Dignity. People, and I really hope and wish that never will happen, as it happened in Ukraine, that people were holding European Union flag and dying, being shot for that. Does European Union trust itself as other countries trusted? And unfortunately was misbraucht, was zrađeni.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Eva. I also would like to ask you, what would you advise to everybody, to private people here in Berlin to do to stop this Russian propaganda and to support those countries who need this support and who need voices and information spread on the way to liberation and democracy?
Thank you for question. I will advise to hear us. That's the most important thing, and to ask us what is happening, and not to write about Georgia without knowing or reading about Georgia, and that's the most important thing. And also what I want to say to private persons, to all German media too, that's very important, is to ask us. It's the only thing you can do now, because we are not so big country and we are not writing too much in other languages. And we are now trying to improve our attitude to write in English, write in German, and that is, please read our comments, read our posts, and read our articles. I wrote also some articles about Russian imperialism toward Georgia and Ukraine, and I analyzed it. And also that I want to say that was the main reason why we established the organization here. That's we saw the need. That's here the people have to know about us, and we are also planning one event, or not event, but kind of not demonstration. Okay, sorry. Okay, we are planning to launch a project which allows us to. It's a name. We are working on it, but name will be "Say Hello to Russian Trolls," because we have to fight Russian trolls in comments, and we have to write about us and write opposite of it, because the German media is really full of Russian trolls, and we have to fight them. And we want to spread our word and spread our voices and share our opinions and share that we are also the people. And please hear us. That's the only thing what I can say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much. And as it goes with my experience, it is the more you get informed and the more you get involved with people affected by Russian oppression, the more you learn about this. And everybody in Germany probably was quite ignorant to this, and this is also because we had the feeling here it's not threatening our country. Okay, there's corruption, there's propaganda going on, and well, we have a few economical bonds that are very nice, and therefore we turn a blind eye to what we think is injustice and wrong, and we kind of get used to ignoring it. So I want to ask everybody, really go on demonstrations. It's essential. It's really essential. Involve with people, talk to people who experience the russkiy and the threat of Russian propaganda and of Russian imperialism, and use your voice for this. Use your voice on social media. Empower other people who are struggling, like going on demonstrations. Tell them it's important. It's always your first demonstration where you go to when you're not used to it. It's always your first post on social media where you risk to get a shitstorm. And remember, I mean, Russia has these bot factories in St. Petersburg. Just go on Twitter and look at any pro-Georgian, pro-Ukraine, pro-Syrian post, and you have an army of Russian bots with like 5 followers, 0 followers, with no profile pic, immediately reacting and totally twisting truth around. It is upon us to be stable on that, and it's upon us to really not fearing this. Russia is using this threat against everybody who stands for freedom. And they're doing it very deliberately, and they think they can scare the people. If we stand together, they can't scare us. Then we are far more powerful. If we give in, we victimize ourselves, and then we get caught by that, and then we get oppressed. We should never allow that. Keep this in mind, really. And the more of people showing up on demonstrations, the more likely it is the government and media changes its views and reports about it and changes laws. Remember the first weeks of full-scale erasure, when full German press was about it, Kiev will last for 4 or 5 days. People who call themselves experts on Eastern European politicians said this. And you see, after more or less 2.5 years, Ukraine is still standing, and this is thanks to also people who go on the street. People who say it's not enough to send 5,000 used helmets, it's actually a sick, cynical joke. It's an insult. And please don't give up on this. You know, we are the people who can make a difference. Don't think of you as a small person, because you're not. And the more you unite, and the more you listen to all of these voices who are here, the more you understand what it's about, and the more you feel the power that leads to closing the Russian house, finally. And this is what has to be done, and it has to be done, that we must enable Ukraine to win. This is essential for Europe, and people wake up now a bit more, but I have the feeling also that they're like not waking up enough. And this is your job to do this, to help here.